Today's video is very different from the others because I just kind of want to talk to you, and I want to talk to you about 3 things. We'll get to those in a second, but first I want to talk about why. Why Axiom? Why any of this? A lot of people treat philosophy as a very introspective thing, and they talk about why we think the way we do. They want to get to the core of our thoughts, and that's all great, but for someone with very limited introspective abilities, it's not really an achievable goal. The way I approach philosophy is that we all look at the world and we make thoughts of it. We make our own philosophies. Every single thing you do is motivated by philosophy. And even in the stories that I write, they're just about, normal people living their lives. Sometimes they're very outlandish and very psychedelic and cool and weird. The philosophy is always in the background, while the people are in the foreground. One of my goals with this channel is to put the engine at the forefront. I want to explore why thoughts, why actions. So it's like high thinking, very deep stuff. But then I have to balance it out with the most banal, superficial things. Because what I love to do is to combine something deep and something very, very stupid. That's me. I want to talk to you about my favorite sports. A lot of philosophers are, little nerds who would never touch grass. I love to touch grass. And also thinking deeply about sports is kind of a good reflection of what I was talking about. When you're practicing sports, you're not supposed to be thinking about anything deep. You're supposed to be focused and concentrate on what you're doing. But behind it, as always, there is some deep philosophy there. So let's get into it. Numero uno, archery. By far my favorite sport in the world. I love it. I love to watch it. I love to do it. I volunteered in competitions in the world championships, actually. Pretty baller. I got this shirt. I got to meet almost all of my favorite archers. It was just a very rewarding experience. But archery is like, well, first off, it's the thing that saved my life. We'll get back to that. What I want to say first is that archery is a sport about monotony. You want to do the same thing every single time, the same way. You want to build a reliable base and then never deviate from it. The slightest thing can set you off. I wear glasses, and changing the glasses every single time threw me off center. Changing your bow, anything about it will throw you off. Oh, as you can see, here is my bow. She's absolutely wonderful. I love her. I built her over a period of maybe like 5 years, getting different parts here and there. Don't judge me for the fact that the grip is, it's very dirty. But many people describe archery as being a Zen sport, and I can see why. I did find this very interesting paper kind of discussing why Zen isn't an inherent part of archery, especially Zen philosophy. Give it a read. Very good stuff. But there is something deeply introspective about archery. When you're competing in archery, you're not competing with the guy next to you, you're competing with yourself. Nothing that they do should affect your score. If you let it, that's just bad mental game. But what you are supposed to do is rely on your inner strength and focus and concentration and base that you have built to do good. Training involves shooting hundreds and hundreds of hours at a Look at this arrow. I got it when I got this bow, but I don't use it in competition. First off, it is way too long. And second, I don't know if you're supposed to use these in competition. These fletchings. I don't think so. But I chose to show it because it goes with the color palette for today. Hi. Is this ASMR? You let me know. But to do good, you have to be very acquainted with your equipment, you have to know your arrows, you have to know your bows, but obviously, most importantly, you have to know yourself. You have to be able to know how to turn all of the focus on everything around you into where you need it. And for someone who has a very active brain that usually stops on unimportant things, that's not always easy. You also have to treat archery with a lot of respect because don't forget, this is a weapon. I've never gone hunting, I've never used archery to hurt anything, but it can happen. So on one hand, it is a sport that requires a lot of self-seriousness, but on the other, it's very, very fun. And I don't think that's just me saying that. Take for example summer camps or activities at different places, even hotels, resorts, whatever. A lot of people have experience of doing archery when they were kids. When done safely, it is fantastic for kids. I remember one time I was practicing, and then this class came up to me of these kids. Maybe they were at most 10 years old. They were surrounding me and I was wearing a purple shirt and they literally started calling me Hawkeye. They also stood right in front of me, so you probably have done archery at some point, so I'm not gonna go on about it. Actually, let's kind of pull on that thread a little bit. I used to be very, very depressed. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, or well, I did know, but I had no clue on how I was gonna get there. One day, out of just pure manic energy, I bought a bow and I started shooting it at this range, and it was like empty, it was abandoned. There was like nobody there for days. And I think almost a week into going there and shooting on my own in silence, this woman came up to me and she just watched, didn't say nothing, left. The next day, she was also there. And I was shooting and she came up to me and she said, "Have you been shooting for long?" I'm like, "No." "That's good, because that bow that you're using, that is a toy. You're gonna hurt yourself." So from that point on, she basically took me in, she offered to coach me, she upgraded all of my stuff. And there was a couple of years in my life where everything pointed to the fact that I was going to be an archery professional in some way, maybe a coach. And it was during that time that she gave me purpose. Eventually, I fell in love again with making movies, so I decided to pursue it again. But if it weren't for her and if it weren't for archery, I don't know where I'd be right now. The following is a message for her. Selma, gracias. En verdad, te agradezco la vida, te agradezco para siempre. Y por favor, perdóname por andar jugando con una flecha. So to sum it all up, archery, it is internal, it is meditative, it is introspective, and you are in competition with yourself.
I only now realize my bow says Axiom on the side. This has been there for over 5 years. It was all meant to be.
All right, up next, we've got wrestling. We've got these shoes. I think it's so funny that we have this really expensive bow. Oh yeah, if you're gonna get into archery, prepare for it to be very expensive. We have this very beautiful bow that's been crafted over the years and built upon and modified and, you know, improved step by step. And then we have the most bitch-ass wrestling shoe. Actually, let me go on a tangent. I started wrestling this year and I learned so much from it. In many ways, it is the exact opposite of archery, but not in every way. We'll get to that. What it is different is that you're not in competition with yourself. Yes, you want to improve your technique and be better at it and improve your training, but you literally have this force coming at you all the time and you have to know how to deal with it. And while archery is meditative, wrestling not so much. This is how I visualize it. Archery is like a checklist. You want to get everything right every single time. Check, 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 tick, tick, tick. Boom. Whereas wrestling is more like switches, conditions that you have to be like, okay, if they're doing this, I do that, I go here, they go there, my foot here, my hand there, I pull here, I push there. So it's way more adaptive. But why wrestling? I've never really done another martial arts before. Well, I did it for the outfit, because I think it's important to put ourselves outside of our comfort zone. I tried an MMA class last year, but there was actually very little that I found interesting. Striking is not my thing. Grappling, on the other hand, that's where it's at. But I do think it's important to put yourself out of your comfort zone so that later you can be better in your comfort zone. Committing to doing something you've never done before makes things less scary. And I think the area where I can notice that most in myself is actually socially. I go to my wrestling class and I strike up conversation with every single person. Wrestling itself is so intimate. You're really getting into someone's space and it's right in someone's face. So with that in mind, going over to say like, hey, how's your day been? It makes it a lot easier. I've always said that sex is a good icebreaker, but if that's not available, wrestling, that'll do just fine. And this is where it's been kind of the opposite of archery, because even though my coach herself was incredibly just amazing and she welcomed me into her life and her social circle, a lot of my opponents were very closed off. They don't want to talk to you, they don't want to be your friend, which makes sense. They're in the zone, they're focused. But they can also be very snobby. As I said, that is expensive. They want to make sure that it was a good investment, that it's worthwhile, that they're good. And when you approach a sport thinking they have to prove that you are good, oftentimes you can't help but think, I am not only good, I am better than. It's kind of a toxic way to approach sports, really. Whatever works, I guess. But something that is very similar with archery is that you do have to develop kind of a strong mind palace. You have to know your strengths, you have to know your weaknesses, and you have to know how to manage them. I'm wearing a singlet actually. Oh, one more thing. Wrestling has left me covered in bruises, but I've had bruises all over here and my back and my neck. But I think the worst one by far has got to be cuts. If you're going to do wrestling, cut your nails. Cut your nails. All right, let's move on to the final topic of today. The two sports that we've spoken about have some way of being interpreted metaphorically. Archery is the hunt. It is zen. Wrestling is combat. It is superiority. It is mind strength. It is temple. It is domination. Very big words that are too complicated to actually kind of apply to real life. This final sport can be used metaphorically. This sport is not about being better than anyone else. This sport is about being there for someone else. Let's talk about diving. So remember how I said that archery is, you're dealing with a weapon. No sport consistently brings up my mortality right up to my face than diving. Because when you go down there, it is you versus nature and you're gonna lose. When you go diving, you give yourself a small window of survival and you want to make the most of it. You want to make experiences that are worth it. Diving has the meditative aspect of archery in the sense that you have to control your breathing, your movements, you have to be aware of yourself. At the same time, it has the conditionals thing that I explained about wrestling. You don't want to do the same thing every time, you have to adapt to what's in front of you. And diving brings you face to face with how small and powerless you actually are. The two other sports I picked kind of nurture this sense of grandeur in yourself. You can shoot that perfect bullseye. You can take that guy down. Scuba diving says no, you can get by and you can have a wonderful time and you can see incredible things, but you're not gonna win. And that opens up to a completely different mentality. When I'm diving, I constantly find myself feeling grateful. When I'm in the water, I'm focused and determined and I'm getting it done, yes. But as soon as I leave the water, I am grateful and I am all smiles. Diving also encourages you to treat people differently because of three main factors, I think. Number one, you have to travel to different places to do diving. Usually you want to see different things. That's what it's all about in the end. So you get to travel and see different cultures, different ways of life, different ways of speech, different ways of thought, different ways of dress, different ways of fuck. Number two, you get to see different parts of the world in terms of the nature, different beaches, different fish, different coral, and you get to see some beaches that are beautiful and clean and tidy and perfect and transparent. And you get to see dead coral. You get to see pollution. You get to see the effect that human beings have on the planet. So often we try to turn our attention away from that to kind of pretend like our life is fine, that we can live this way and no one gets hurt. Well, they do. Diving is incredibly humbling, and whereas I have like one big one big narrative of how archery saved my life over the span of a few years, I can tell you a very simple and short story of how diving has also saved my life. I was down there in the water, it was a very strong current, my lungs were just not doing the right job. We had only just got to the point of the water, which I think was like 18 or 17 meters. My tank was halfway empty. My friend Ananda, she shared her tank with me. So for the rest of the dive, we both had to be conscious of how much we were breathing because we knew that we were sharing our supply. If you have a tank and you're down there, you can't shoot up because, this. So once you're down there, you have to commit to being down there. And if someone else relies on you to make it all the way through, you gotta live up to that responsibility. So as I said, you don't really want to take anyone down, you have to bring everyone up. Well, I guess you technically do want to take people down. So let's round it all up. We have a sport about being meditative, about being introspective, about being peace, about being focused. We have a sport about respecting the opponent and also taking them down. About dominating, but while following the rules. You want to make it fair. You have to adapt and improvise and think on the spot and be clever. And finally, we have a sport where everything gets put on pause. Mother Nature takes center stage. You have to be respectful. You have to accept that in the end, you're powerless. And that is fine. All of the delusions of power are just that. They're delusions. The power you have is within yourself. And with that, you can make incredible memories. And everything that you leave behind will be washed away. And that's all right. So yeah, I hope you see my point now. Deep philosophical thoughts behind moments that are instinctive and they're active, and you don't find yourself actively philosophizing, but there is so much going on underneath the surface. If you have, thank you for watching my videos this year. It's been loads of fun, and it's an absolute privilege to be able to share my thoughts with you. So bottom line, what did we learn today? We learned that team sports suck.